What's up guys, and welcome back to the infamous project. Not very often do you see me sitting down, but I need to sit down for a few minutes and give you guys a little bit of context about today's video. So if you've been watching the storyline behind this car that's sitting behind me, this car has been in my life since the early 2000s. I built it way back in the day, sold it, bought it back, and the whole spiel. If you guys haven't seen those videos, make sure to check out, there's a whole playlist on this car. But one of the more recent videos I did on it was explaining how the timing cover is pretty much puking its guts through the gasket, and there's some nasty leaks up there resulting in some overheating issues, and that water pump I don't think has probably ever been changed. The radiator has been upgraded, a lot of the other maintenance stuff has been done, but there are some key things that need to be upgraded to this car because, well, no Foxbody is perfect, no Foxbody is ever complete. Let's just put it that way. So I've been meaning to do this video in terms of upgrading maybe the top end of the motor, and I actually want to throw it out to you guys because I was hoping to potentially do some GT40 irons on it. I thought I had a lead on a set. Unfortunately, that fell through. So I don't have a set of heads at the moment for the car, but with that said, I can probably find a good pair, or maybe you guys out there have a set that you're willing to sell. So GT40 heads, I already have a B303, and I know that some people will say the almighty B cam, and then some other people will be like, why would you put that in there? And the car already has Cobra intakes. So that's sort of where I would like to potentially take the car. And the fact that the timing cover is puking its guts, well, the timing cover needs to come off, the timing cover needs to come off, why wouldn't you swap the cam? And the other thought that I had to myself is maybe, you know what, maybe I should do something different. Maybe I should put a gear drive in it instead of the roller chain, which is probably another debatable modification. But at the same time, it's like, this is a street car. You know, I want to have fun with it. It's slammed to the ground. I'm not trying to win races, but I would like the car to sound as good as it looks. And this car already sounds very unique with the exhaust setup that's on it. And in case you guys are wondering, that is a high flow catted BBK H pipe with straight pipes. That's it. There's no mufflers. There's 4-inch MagnaFlow tips on the rear, which are pretty long. So that's going to help give the certain tone that the car has. And there's also a set of BBK, I believe they're equal lengths. I don't remember. But anyways, what I want to get at is, number one, is get your guys' opinion on whether it's worth opening the motor up that much. And I was sort of kind of going back and forth, like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Just fix the timing cover, gasket, and call it a day. Or should I get a little bit more involved? Obviously, I'm sure you guys would love to see the content, but I got some news last week, and I was debating whether or not I was going to share the news with you guys, but I decided to go ahead and do so. And in fact, I alluded to this on one of the podcasts that myself and Casual Customs did with Paul and Sally DeFox, and everyone kind of was in agreement that it's a story or information that should be shared with you guys. So it really just adds more history to the car, and I've actually been sort of beside myself the whole past week since I found out this news. So the story goes like this. If you guys have watched the video on how I tracked this car down, then you would understand what it took to find the individual who had owned the car for pretty much 10 years. Very private guy. In fact, you will see on that video that he's not in it. You'll hear him talking about the story of him almost like, who the fuck is this guy that's trying to reach out to me to potentially buy my car? I found you, it was on LinkedIn, and that message, and I'm like it didn't really look like you were that active, and I think it was like 6 months later, and it was just like...
what happened was I got that message, I'm like, who the f is this guy? I'm not answering this guy. Do you have a 91 Mustang by chance? I'm like, I'm not answering that. A little odd, right?
All in all, it worked out. You know, we were talking for almost 2 years. You know, I eventually had found him on LinkedIn after buying the used vehicle package for the car that lists all of the previous and current registrants, and that's how I found him. I was still in Dubai. We went back and forth, and eventually I finally got to see the car, and eventually he sold me the car. And extremely humble and cool individual. It's one of those people that you meet, and when you meet them, it's like you feel like you've known them forever. You just kind of get along, and you just naturally keep in touch, which we did. In fact, just a few months ago, he was texting me and said, "Hey man, sell me your silver coupe. Like, I sold you mine, so sell me one of your pride and joys." Because this was the first car that he had bought in his collection. This guy had everything that you could dream of. Like, you guys think I have an impressive shop? This guy, literally, I mean, Ferrari, Lambo, new Shelby, new Viper, crazy Hummer, like proper Hummer, and some motorcycles. Believe he even had a plane. Could be wrong with that one. I'm pretty sure he was going through for his pilot's license. I don't remember, but everything was there, and you could eat off the floors in that place. It was so cool. And part of the only reason why he sold me this car back is because he wanted to put a bar in his garage where the car was. So needless to say, super cool dude, right? And here's what happened. A week ago, his wife actually found me on Instagram, and she reached out and she said, "Hey Chris, I got some terrible news, but my husband passed away last month." And he was pretty much my age. And it just, like, it's actually making the hairs on my arms raise up right now. She pretty much said, that car meant so much to him, and it is probably, or was, just as important to him as that car is to you. So please take care of it. And, I just wanted to let you know, because it felt like we had known each other for a long time, and he always talked about you in the car and so on and so forth. So, yeah, every day I've just kind of been going through my head, because literally 2 days before, on another podcast with Tom, aka War Admiral, he was actually asking me, God forbid if something happened, is there a plan in place for the cars and everything else? Which of course I said there was. And this just like shocked me. And I've been thinking about what to do, because now it's like, not only is this car so important to me, I know it was so important to him as well. And now that he's gone, it's just, I feel like this greater sense of responsibility, because it just adds to the craziness of the story of this car. And I want to continue to improve it, and I want to continue to take care of it. So I reached back out to his wife and said, I want to do a couple videos. I want to do some improvements to the car and kind of carry forward the legacy. Do you mind if I share the story? So, of course, again, the guy was super private. I'm not going to share names or any information like that. So please don't ask. I'm going to respect the privacy that's always been there, which I can completely appreciate and understand. So that's it. Sorry, again, it's not really much DIY in here. I think what we'll probably do, because the most important thing before making a decision of opening up the motor to do extensive surgery, so to speak, or a extensive procedure, is to make sure that we have a good foundation. So I think a compression test would be a really good way to start, and just to make sure that our compression numbers are looking good. And if those all look good, then maybe it'll be one of those, okay, we'll leave it alone, in your opinions. Maybe you guys will say, just go for it. And I'm sure there's gonna be a really good mix. So I'm curious to hear from you guys what you think I should do with the car. So we'll go ahead and do a compression test. I wanted to share the story with you guys, give you guys a little bit more context, because now I'm a little bit more motivated to make sure that this car continues to live on and create the legacy out of it. Maybe some of you guys will be like, just don't touch it. That's another way to go. Don't do anything. But it is what it is. So sorry for the saddening news. Don't like to do it, but I think it's important that we all just think about that situation. Now, I know a lot of you guys are watching, you guys have cars too, and you guys have families and you have everything else. So we shouldn't live our lives in fear. We should live our best lives and enjoy life as much as we can, which I believe I've done a really good job at doing. But you know, me, I'm always kind of the guy that feels like I could always push or do better. And again, I'm reflecting at this time, just because, you know, as you can only be so ready, but just be aware, guys. So if you don't have plans in place, if you've got prized possessions or whatever, make sure that you just think about it. If something happens, you know, what will happen to your stuff, what will happen to your loved ones, just give that a thought. And that's really the important part of this message. So thank you again for that. Now we can start to get our hands dirty. We'll do the compression test. We'll see what we're working with, and we'll go from there. Looks a lot dirtier. There's been a lot of miles on this thing, you know, Canada all the way down to the Chocolate Fox, and it's been driven down here a little bit in Texas, and you can see the result. Needs a detail. It's amazing. I was actually going through the videos of when I first saw the car again off the previous owner, and how clean and immaculate he had this thing. And in fact, the car cover that's on the silver notch was actually on this car, which is the coolest cover. And a lot of people have actually reached out and asked me. So if you guys are curious to know, Form Fit by Covercraft. And it's a badass cover. Like, it fits a Foxbody so nicely, and a notch at that. So that is cut and designed to fit a notch. So if any of you guys are interested in a badass cover, there you have it. So coming back to this dirty, filthy beast and looking down at the headers, I was right. They are equal length, so we know what's going on there. But if we look down in here, and it's just got all of that nasty goo looking, probably some stop leak puking out, a little bit of gasket debris and everything else that that really needs to be cleaned up. So we need to tackle that. The other issue is that Mr. Notorious was actually going to try and attempt to get that fixed before driving the car down to the Chocolate Fox, and some of those bolts were seized, like the power steering bolts. And his concern was that, you know, if the car is this difficult to work on right from the get-go, what's the timing cover going to look like? Are we going to be breaking bolts trying to get that off? So I told him to leave it alone, because it was like literally the day before he had to leave for the Chocolate Fox, and it's like, man, just leave it be. You know, worst case scenario, the car's temperature is going to creep up. He did all right. It didn't actually affect him. It didn't start creeping up until I started driving it down here in the Texas heat. So with that said, that's what we're working with. So we'll do the compression test, see what the numbers come back as, and if everything is good from that perspective, you guys can give me your feedback, and we'll see, you know, which direction should I go with the car. Do the compression test. I'm going to pull out all of the spark plugs. You can do them one by one if you want. I like to pull them all out just because it'll make it easier for the motor to turn over. I like to disconnect either the fuel pump relay or hit the inertia switch in the trunk, so that way you're not constantly pushing fuel through the cylinders without igniting. Now, in reality, we're not trying to get the highest readings. We want to see consistent readings, right? So we want to see something that doesn't have more than 10% variance across all the cylinders. So for example, if every cylinder was at 130, we wouldn't want to see a cylinder, you know, if the top cylinder, the highest pressure was at 130, we wouldn't want to see a cylinder that has 13 psi less. So we wouldn't want to see a cylinder at 117 or below, just because that variance from the lowest pressure cylinder versus the highest means that, you know, there might be a worn ring in there. It could be something else, a valve leaking. I'm gonna go ahead now, pull all these spark plugs out, start cranking this thing over, and see what kind of numbers we get. All right guys, this note to self, I need to say it. So on some headers, on the equal lengths, be very careful on cylinder number 3 so that you don't accidentally, especially if you're running aluminum heads. So if you're not running aluminum heads, you want to be careful that you don't break your spark plug. And number 2 is if you're on aluminum heads, you don't want to potentially break your spark plug. But more importantly, you don't want to cross thread or strip threads in your head, because what happens is sometimes the head of your ratchet will actually push against the port of the header. It'll actually start, as you're running it out, it'll start pushing sideways on your plug, and you could potentially cross thread your cylinder head. So just be careful. Usually I always make sure that there's enough clearance and that the ratchet isn't resting on that side, or use an extension to get past it. And ask me how I know. I had a very close call once with Mr. Notorious, and luckily we caught it in the nick of time, but it was, it could have been ugly. Let's just put it that way. I can't believe all the original emissions equipment still on the car. I did find a possible little vacuum leak. Right here you can see that this vacuum tube was kind of going in here like this, but it's not on very snug. Like, if anything, they probably should have put a tie wrap on that or something, but I'm gonna have to go through and I'll double check all the vacuum lines when I do the maintenance to this car. That was probably explaining a little bit of weird drivability at low RPM, usually when things are sucking in more vacuum than normal. So we'll get that looked at. The compression test is complete. One thing that I should have mentioned before is also disconnect your coil. And I could hear, when I was doing the first cylinder, I could hear the sparks probably arcing off random various things like the headers or other parts off the engine. So yeah, just unplug your coil terminal there, and that way you're not throwing spark, we don't have fuel, and things are just turning over. So here's our results. Our highest number was 150. Which 10% of this gives us 15 psi to play with. So if we do 150 minus 15, excuse this marker, it sucks, nothing should be lower than 135. And we scraped by, we're not in spec here. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back to this cylinder. I'm going to see what's going on. I'm going to just test it again, as maybe if you don't have your fitting on 100%, you know, thread it in and some air is blowing by, that could be the cause of it. So we're just going to double check this one. And if it's still down around 130, I'm going to try putting a little bit of oil down in that cylinder and see if the number comes up. If the number comes up, it means there's a little bit of blow by coming from the rings. If there is no change to the number, then it could be indicative that there's something up near the heads, and that would just kind of solidify the case of potentially swapping out the heads. So anyways, let's retest this guy right here, and we'll see what's going on. What's interesting is that both these guys are relatively low. I don't think this car eats any coolant. It's down. I can see the line down there. It's right down around there, but don't think head gasket related, but you never know. So crazier things have happened. Let's go ahead and retest cylinder number 3. All right, guys, so we're about 135, right on the nose. We're scraping by. For shits and giggles, I'm just gonna throw not even a teaspoon of oil down in there, and let's see what happens. This little funnel down in there. With that cylinder head, I don't know. So I'm just gonna feed it a little cap full of oil. Now you guys could like hook up like a little tube and feed it, you know, with a vacuum hose or something like that. All right, guys, so we went up to about 141. I threw a little bit of oil in there, and you guys saw the results. We gained about an extra 6 psi or so. So one important thing that we can do now is we can go back to our spark plugs, and this is why I laid them out the way that I did, because it's important to go back and take a look. So if we remember, 1, 2, 3. So this is the guy that would be, I guess, our worst performer here. And, you know, he's looking all right. Like, he's not oily or anything like that. It's not horrible. Now you guys know as much as I do in terms of the motor and what's going on and what needs to be done. So it's time for you guys to give me your feedback and your opinions. Now, some of you might say, leave the heads, don't touch them. In fact, don't even swap the cam. Just do your timing cover gasket. Maybe throw that gear drive in if you want to make it a little noisier and sound cooler, and send it. So maybe run a thicker weight oil, send it on its way. And like, this car runs beautifully, guys. Like, I'm sure there are many, many miles. Remember, I'm not trying to win races. I don't drive the living shit out of this car or any of those things. The motor as it is, I'm sure would last for quite a bit longer. So keep that in mind when you're giving me your feedback. Some of you guys might say, you know what, pull that motor out, rebuild it completely, and just, you know, do it once and be done with it. Or maybe do the Band-Aid, the short and easy, change that timing cover gasket, get that done, drive it until I'm ready to do a complete build, or compression weakens, rings or bearings wear out more, whatever it might be. So there you have it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for keeping up with me in the story on this car. And again, you know, this car isn't just about me, it's also about the previous owner. And, you know, this car has been so important in many people's different lives, not only for me and the previous owner, but I know the guy that I originally bought it off of. I know a lot of close friends of mine. The memories that have been created in this car are so important to so many people. And, you know, this is one of the cars that kind of put me on the map back in the day. Everybody knew me because of this car. I drove this thing everywhere. So there you have it. A little bit of a sentimental video, but I think an important video. And if you guys have followed along all the way to the end of this video, I know that this car and this information has been important to you guys as well. So as always, thank you again for your support. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys here next time on the Infamous Project.